And say your name and where you were born and what year you were born. And just give us a little information about yourself.
I'm Florence Kathleen Taylor.
Hi, Grandma.
Hi, Mark.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1934.
1934. Okay.
I'm Florence Kathleen Taylor. And the Florence Kathleen was named after my grandmother. And I was born, I lived in just outside of Gooderham, out in the country, out in the bush, I would say. And I was born in Torrey Hill because I went up to my aunt and uncles, or my mother went up to my aunt and uncles, and she was going to go to the Red Cross outpost in Wilberforce. But when she stopped in at my aunt and uncle's, no, that wasn't me. I'm telling you the wrong one. Go back. Take that out.
Okay.
No. I was born in Wilberforce. No. Yes. Jeez. I was born in Torrey Hill.
Okay.
Okay, because...
What year?
1934.
1934. April 4th?
April 10th.
April 10th?
And we lived just outside of Gooderham, kind of in the bush. But the train ran up through right from Howland Junction right through to Bancroft 3 times a week. So you could go up on the train, you could go up on the train Tuesday and come back Thursday. And so my mother decided that it was getting time for me to be born, so she would start heading up to the outpost, the Red Cross outpost in Wilberforce. So she got on the train and went up, and they stopped in Torrey Hill. The train did. They stopped in every little town because they were letting people off and picking people up. And when they stopped in Torrey Hill, my mother said, "Oh, I think I'll go and visit my mother. I don't think I'm going to have this baby yet." So she got off the train, and I guess her brothers met her with the horse and sleigh or horse and wagon or whatever they had at that time, and took her up to Grandma's. And lo and behold, guess who came that night? I was born that night in my grandmother's bed. Yes, and then, of course...
and so, who are your parents?
The nurse eventually did come that night, too.
Okay.
But
where did the nurse come from?
Wilberforce. She was stationed in the Red Cross outpost, and she came from Wilberforce. Well, the boys went up, went up from my grandma's with the horse and sleighs and brought her down because she didn't have any way much of transportation. And
what would the main form of transportation be?
Well, for most people, I guess it was horse and sleighs or horse and cutter or something like that.
And so...
Not very many people had cars, maybe very few.
Yeah. What are your parents' names?
My father's name was Alan Cornelius Billings.
And when was he born?
He was born in 1903.
1903?
Mm-hmm.
And when did he live until?
He lived until 1980.
And your mom?
My mother was born in 1910, and she lived until...
what's her name?
Nora. She only had one name.
Just Nora?
Nora, yeah. Nora McNeely, she was. And she lived until 2001. And my parents now I think about it, they were silly, but at the time they thought it was the right thing to do. They got married in 1929, the beginning of the Depression. And nobody had anything. You'd be lucky, really, if you could even buy food because it was a little later than that. You had to have coupons to buy your bread or your tea or your butter or sugar or stuff like that.
How'd you get the coupons?
Well, I think the storekeepers gave them to people. They were only allotted so much to sell because they were keeping most of the stuff for the war people.
Oh, okay.
And we did all right. We never starved to death or never went hungry, but we sure didn't have what the kids today have. I didn't have a toy at all. until, I don't know, I was probably 9 or 10. And some way I got a doll. I don't know how now. And you know what? And then my brother had a bicycle he got from somebody that wasn't a good bike. It was just an old piece of junk. And he was riding it, and I don't know where I'd left my doll, but I'd left it someplace I shouldn't have, I guess. And he ran over it with the bicycle and broke the head on it because it was a porcelain head.
Mm-hmm. So to my understanding, there were no plastics.
No.
No sort of plastic.
No.
So did you have like a toothbrush or something?
Oh, heavens, no. We didn't even know what they were. No. And I still have most of my teeth. I do.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
So maybe we brushed them too much.
Maybe.
But anyway, my mother and dad had quite a hard time because they had 2 boys, and then they had 2 girls, but they didn't live at all. They were just born, and that was all. And then they had me and my sister, and that was our family. And we lived out of town, you know.
And what was your sister's name?
Emily.
What's her full name?
Emily May Elliott.
Emily May Elliott. And when was she? Was she older or younger? When was she born?
She's 6 years younger than me.
6 years younger. And is she still alive right now?
Yes, she is.
Okay, and this is as of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I had a brother, too.
Oh, you had a brother, too?
Mm-hmm. He was born 1932.
Okay, so there are 3 of you.
No, I had another brother, too.
Okay, so
and
4.
Yeah, he was killed in 1960 in a logging accident. They used to have to haul the logs on big trucks, and they'd get big piles of them. And one night he went into the yard with a load, and he undid the chain. I guess the one log on top wasn't tightened in good, and it fell off and hit him.
And what year was that?
1960.
Okay.
Now, and we lived in Gooderman. We didn't have, I remember we had sleds. And we all used to go to church, the whole family. There were ministers that came to the houses. And so we would go to different houses for church. And the ministers came at first they came on horseback. And then they had one old car they drove. And everybody would gather at the one person's house that night. Next week we would gather at somebody else's house for church. And the one night in particular we had walked away. We had to walk every place because we didn't have a car. And we had walked away, up quite a long hill to get to the place where it was church. So of course the boys had to take the bobsleds, you know. So after church they all got on the sleigh, the boys and my dad. They were going to do this big long hill on the sleigh. So no traffic on the road, so it was quite safe. Mm-hmm. And so they got on the sleigh and gave it a push, and they were just going like everything. And some way my dad must have fell off when they just got started because he said, "Well, look at me. I never left the sleighs." And my mother said, "Well, what are you sitting on the road for?" And the boys had gone on without him all the way down the hill. You know, we didn't have anything, but we enjoyed everything we did. You know, outside making snowmen or snowball fights or stuff like that, you know. Mm-hmm. We enjoyed it, but we'd go in and have something to eat or something hot or something. And like I say, we didn't have much. We didn't have a lot of toys. We didn't have a snow machine or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And, but then around in about I was about 10 years old. And my mother had heard that there was a factory in Wilberforce that was hiring people. So she said to my dad, "We're moving up there." And he said, "Well, you go if you like, but I'm not moving." So Mom said, "Well, I'm going anyway." So she packed up me and my sister and my oldest brother. We all moved up. Well, then it wasn't very long till my dad and my other brother decided to come too. So they were all working there for a while.
What was the factory?
It was a veneer mill where they make the very, very thin layer for furniture. Oh. Maple and all that different kinds of wood, oak and stuff. Yeah, and they all worked there, and we did well in Wilberforce. It was a good place to live, and then we all went to school, and I got a good job in the office for the veneer company after I finished school.
And like, how did you go to school? Like, what was your school life like? Was it at a house? Or?
No, the school was the school. It was a big schoolhouse, and we rode in what they called a van, and it was like a big box with a bench on each side, and it would be long. It would be probably down to that door and back up to here, and it would be wide enough that you could walk up between the benches. Okay. There could be benches here and here, and in the wintertime, mind you, they had a little stove in there to heat that box so we wouldn't be too cold. And the horses drew this. They put this box on big sleighs. Or, yes, sleds. Or not sleds, runners. And we went along quite nicely. We had the fire going, so we were all warm. And in the summertime, of course, they took the stove out. And then the sides would go halfway down on this big box for summer. So we could sit in there and have quite an enjoyable ride with the horses pulling us. Mm-hmm. Of course, they put wheels on this big box in the summer. Yeah. And that was when we were in Goodham. And then when we moved up to Wilberforce, I think we lived close enough that we could walk to the school. And one of my uncles drove a school bus. They then had changed into buses. Or vans or whatever people had. Mm-hmm. So we went to school, and it was good schools. And I finished my education in Bancroft in a business section, in the business course.
So how long did you go to school for?
10, 11 years.
11 years?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be how old when you finished?
The last year I got about 2 years in one.
Okay.
Because I had a full business commercial course. And I was 16 when I finished. And that September, I got a job in the office for the veneer mill. And I worked there for about 30 years. And I married my next door neighbor, Frederick Henry Taylor. And we had 3 children. We had Greg.
Yeah, what are their names?
Greg, Jane Elizabeth. Oh, Gregory James, Jane Elizabeth, and Barbara Gale. And they all did well. They went to school and went to university, and they all have great jobs now, and they've all done very well. And they have nice homes, and they have good jobs. Mm-hmm. And they have nice families, too. Greg has Mark and Simon, 2 boys, beautiful looking boys. And Barb has Mark, Matthew, and Rebecca.
Barb. You said Barb.
Oh, did I say Barb? I mean Jane. Jane has Matthew and Rebecca. And Barb has Taylor and Desmond.
Okay, so what happened? You worked 30 years at the veneer mill,
mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
I worked in the office. Don't say veneer mill.
Oh, in the office.
Yeah.
And so, like, did the mill close down? Like, is that why?
Well, no. When I started having children, I kind of quit work for a while because I had 3 kids, so I wanted to stay home and look after them.
And I believe you guys got a car at some point.
Yes, we did. We got a Dodge, a blue-colored Dodge. And that was after we got married, we got the car.
Remember what year that was? What year did you guys get married?
1954. So it'd be 1955 we got the car. And but it wouldn't start very good in the mornings, but we kept it for a while, and then we got another one, and I think it was maybe a Chev. And then I think after that we got a Buick, and that was the best car of them all.
And how much did you pay for your first car?
Well, maybe, I don't know, $800 maybe. Maybe that much, I don't know. And we built our own house. Well, we did hire a person to put the basement in and to put the walls up, but we sheeted the roof in, and we sheeted the walls in with drywall, and And we did a lot of the work ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we were mortgage free when we got done with it.
And how much did the house cost you to build total, do you think?
Oh, probably $4,000. 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom, dining room, kitchen, living room. Well, it did us.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very small compared to the houses you guys live in.
Yeah, nowadays it's a lot bigger houses.
But you know, we lived in that little shack in Gooderman. We didn't have all kinds of toys or anything. But I don't know, we all loved each other and we all had lots of fun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember any fights or anything like that. Mm-mm. And
so,
I remember one Christmas my mother made me a doll out of a man's stocking. And she took the foot of it and squeezed it in like this and made the face for the doll. And then she took up the yarn and a darning needle and put the eyes on and the mouth. And I just treasured that little doll. And I played by myself most of the time when we lived there. And out just down from our house there was a whole bunch of flat rock like that. So that's where I played. That was my playhouse. And other than for that, boy.
So what sort of Christmas gifts would you get when you were a kid, and then what sort of gifts would you give your children when they were kids? Like what sort of?
When they were kids, I think they mostly wanted clothes and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I can hardly remember what I got them. And, well, I always got pretty good gifts.
Yeah, what was your favorite?
But I think I got a family ring, a ring with all their birthstones on it. Oh. Yeah.
And so who are your grandparents then? Who are your mom's parents and your dad's parents?
My mother's parents are Florence, Kathleen. She was Riel. In the distance, I think there's a little bit connection to Louis Riel.
Okay. And where are they from?
Grandma and Grandpa. No, not them. They were right here in Canada, but my great-grandparents, like her parents, I think his came from Ireland, and I don't know. I think hers might have came from England, I have a feeling. And my dad's parents came from England, or his grandparents came from England. And they were real pioneers. My mother tells me about when they moved in. At that time, the government would give each family a parcel of land.
That's right.
But they had to go there and live and clean that land and make their own, build a house. And they'd cut down the trees to build these log houses. And they'd dig up the sod off the ground, and put it on the roof for the roof. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother, when she first moved there, she was so scared because she said the bears would come right to the door. Yeah, it was really, really pioneering.
And whereabouts did they come into Canada?
Yeah. I don't know where they came. Where they came into? Oh, they came to. They ended up in Gooder. Well, not Gooderham, but. Where were they? They were back further than Goodham. They were in what they call Bear Lake or something like that, I think it was called.
And the other side of the family has kind of just been in the area at the same time, with their lives too. Granddad Billings' people came to Orono first. And there was 5 brothers, I think, came. And then they separated. I don't know what happened. Some of them stayed down in Orono, and then some went back up into Glamorgan, like up into the Goodham area. And the ones in Orono did all right. There was one man that was a minister, and there was one man that was head of a band. And I don't know about the other ones. They moved on and moved up into Pioneer, a piece of land too, so... I don't know very much about them because
my grandmother, Billings, like she died very early in childbirth.
Yeah. So, how big were your mom and dad's families? How many?
My mother's family had. Let me see. There was Florence and Cora and Mom and Pearl. That's 4 girls in that family, and there was Ned and Lloyd and Leonard and Alan. 4 boys. I guess there was 8 in my mother's family.
And do you know like where all of them kind of ended up, or maybe? Do people kind of stay in the same area, or did they move away?
They moved, but not a far distance.
Yeah. Okay.
And let's see, my one aunt moved down around the Bobcaygeon area, and I had another aunt that died fairly young, and I had another aunt that died as a baby. And then, let's see, I had an uncle. He stayed around the same area. And another uncle. The uncles all stayed around the same area, except one uncle went to the war when it was on.
Okay.
And the other ones on my dad's side, I think, other than the 2 that stayed in Orono, and I don't know where they went. But there is a book out called Out of the Mist. And that's in Orono. You can get that book. And it talks about these Billingses. I think they stayed right in the Orono area all their life. But if you would go back into the woods like my first grandparents did, the government gave you a plot of land because they wanted to get the land cleared.
Right.
And then, you see, England had given Canada a lot of these. Well, they gave them the whole thing. England did. Yeah. We were a colony. And then Canada started giving out plots of ground, so people would move here. Would come here and harvest it and clean it. And they didn't have anything. The only time they ever went to town was to buy sugar or flour. Yeah. They had their own wood, and they made their own bread, and they made their own everything. And in the summer, all you did was pick berries. Even when I was a kid and we lived in Gooderham, we picked berries. Well, because they preserved them, we'd have food in the winter. And I've seen my mother pick a pail about this high, maybe, of berries, and walk into town in Gooderham and sell them that night. Maybe get $2 for that pail full. But that would give her money to buy maybe her sugar or stuff like that.
So there was a lot of trading kind of involved?
Well, no.
A lot of kind of gathering your own goods and then selling them?
I remember too when we lived in Goodham, my father got a pig one year and he was going to raise it so we would have meat that winter. Well, we all played with that pig so much that we hated to even let him kill it. But he did end up killing it, and I guess we probably ate it, but I don't remember.
So what sort of foods would you eat then when you were growing up?
Potatoes, vegetables, fruit. The berries we'd preserve, in the summer, and we'd eat them in the winter. And the same with apples. There was tons of wild apple trees. And you could just go out and get all the apples, crab apples or whatever, and you make applesauce and preserve them. And, you could make everything. Make your jams and jellies and everything.
Did you have to grow your own potatoes?
Oh, yeah. Everybody had a big garden.
To grow all your food?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. You wouldn't have survived if you didn't have a big garden. A lot of people, too, even had a few cows.
To provide milk for themselves. That's pretty cool.
And the ones that didn't have, I don't know what they did for milk. Probably bought a quart or two from somebody that had cows, right?
So did you have cows?
No. We never did,
just
but I remember Fred's dad had a cow when they moved up to Wilberforce. And the cows just used to roam loose all over town. When it was time to milk, Fred would have to go all over town and hunt for their cow to bring it home to milk. Oh, yes, it was a pretty carefree life. Yeah. And you could trust everybody. And I remember this one thing that really I remember as we were living in this little place in Gooderham. And it was during the Depression, and boy, people were hard up. There was lots of people who had nothing to eat. If you didn't have a piece of ground to grow your own, you know. And one day there was this mom and us home, us kids, and Dad was at work. He used to walk about 2 miles to work every day. And a knock came to the door, Mom went to the door, and they used to have what they called tramps. They were the same as like hobos or something like that. But they called them tramps, and they would walk from place to place. And this guy came to the door this day, and we were all just scared to death. And he wanted to come in. He wanted something to eat. Mom said, well, I sure haven't got much to give you, but I'll give you what I got. So she peeled some potatoes and cooked a pot of potatoes and boiled up a pot of prunes for him, and he ate it all. He said, thanks very much, and away he went. But we never knew when they come in, you know, what they were going to do. But it was a lot safer then than it is now.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, what else?
Let's talk about Grandpa Fred. So, when was he born?
1932.
1932, and when did he pass away?
2000.
And who was his parents?
His mother was Elsie May. She was Turpin before she got married. Her parents were Turpins. And his father was John Creasy Taylor, and he came from England. And I don't know who his parents were. They never came over. It was just him. But he did have some brothers come one year and visit.
Where was his mom from?
His mother was, well, as far as I knew them, they were from down around Grafton, Coburg area, down there. And they all had pretty good farms down there. And like a lot of them had orchards, apple orchards and plum orchards, and because Fred and I used to go down there and get all kinds of plums and tomatoes and apples and.
And so, tell me a little bit more about Grandpa Fred's life and where was he born and where did he?
I think he was born in Pickering. His father worked on the railroad. See, he would go wherever they would send him to work. And there was 5 in the family. There was Elsie and Fred and Bill and Eileen and Bob. And Bob lived in Omemee, and he was a tool and die maker and worked in, I think it was Johnson Evinrude or something like that in Peterborough. Bill was I don't know what he was, but he worked in the Evinrude place too, Peterborough. And Eileen, she worked in West Clocks in Peterborough for a while, and then she moved. She started going with Murray Agnew. He owned the Agnew store there, or he was working with his mother and dad at the time. And so she started going with him, and they got married, and she moved back to Wilberforce. Yeah, and then there was Elsie. Elsie got in the Army, and I think it was Army, and she ended up in BC. So that's where she's living today, in BC.
So what sort of big world events or big events even in your area that you remember the most from your life?
None. Just when the war ended, there seemed to be a big celebration, but it didn't really affect us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you guys are so remote.
Yeah. And, and I can remember we would have concerts, school concerts.
Yeah.
And they would be big ones. There'd be all sorts of plays and everything because there were a lot of kids in the school then. And the teachers worked hard to put on a good concert.
Yeah.
But we had to walk 2 miles to get into school for the concert.
Oh.
And so we would be in there for the concert, and I used to think that was just a tremendous thing.
Yeah.
And then we'd walk home, and I tell you, one night it was so cold we should have all froze to death right on the road walking home. And nobody could offer you a ride home because they had their horses and sleighs, and they were going their way and had to get home in a hurry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess like they say, God has a plan for each one of us when he sends us to this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that was our plan. So we did it.
So what's the biggest takeaway that you have from all your experiences? Like, what would you recommend, like, say, like, my grandkids? What would you want to, if you could give them, like, one piece of advice, what would it be?
What would it be? Let's see. Well, the main thing in life is you've got to be kind to everybody. And you never know when you might need a good deed done.
Mm-hmm. I think that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything else? Or?
I don't, except just to say, I'm so glad I had children, and I've got all these wonderful grandchildren that I just love to death.
Yeah.
Yes, I did love them all. And this Mark fellow here, actually, he thought enough of me, I guess, to come and live with me for 3 summers.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so it worked out very well.
Yeah, it did.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks, Grandma.
Oh, you're welcome. I hope it helped out some.
Yeah, I think it's great. You got a lot.